Thanks for the opportunity to be part of this roundtable today. I think, every year when we think this year is the most exciting and unprecedented, yet something else happens. And after 2.5 years of having to deal with analyzing the effects of the pandemic, here we are now looking at how the Ukraine invasion is affecting us and affecting BRICS. And of course, there are a number of different angles on this. And interestingly enough, I have many of my master students on this panel today listening in, because this is exactly what we've been discussing this week in our course on global governance. And I've been trying to make them a little bit more au fait with some of the debates, particularly the debate around the solidarity that is supposed to be part of BRICS and the Global South. So I would just like to throw out a couple of controversial thoughts today, since we're short of time, not to go into too much detail, but just to say that it was very interesting to again read the summit declaration, which we've all been told by the Chinese ambassador and president to read very carefully. Interesting to read it in the sense that we know that one of the aspects that BRICS continues to play up is that BRICS as a bloc is a different configuration of both ideas and of ways of collaborating, ways of sustaining development that is a departure from the old North-South post-colonial, still exploitative types of arrangements which are embedded in international organizations or international institutions like the IMF, the World Bank, and also in terms of OECD types of loans to the developing world. So we know that one of the major tickets to wanting to be on the BRICS bus is that this is supposed to be a new form of more inclusive, more transformatory of the international sphere, way of collaborating and cooperation. And so there's a great deal of emphasis on the ideational glue that holds BRICS together. And for me, it was interesting this week because my master students very quickly picked up on what is this ideational glue and why are there states in BRICS that consider themselves to be emerging economies. For those of us who deal with this topic every day, we kind of gotten used to using the phrase emerging economy. But for the layperson, the anomalies between the almost now number one economic strong country in the global sphere, China, being up there as an emerging economy, and with India as number 5, Russia also in the top 10, it does beg the question of why and how this bloc formed, and what is the reason ultimately for such a diverse and ideologically diverse group to be actually collaborating and speaking about transformation in the global sphere. So the second point I want to make in terms of this, more controversial take on it is that in discussing transformation and in upholding themselves as the bloc which sustains an idea of the global South, there's also this leitmotif in all of the summits to say multilateral transformation. But if we look at the last summit declaration, the types of transformation that are pointed out there are around, for example, getting the World Trade Organization to work as it purported to want to do way back in the day, and which for a variety of reasons, including Trump's protectionist regime and other aspects, has not worked as such. It's all about also enforcing a more balanced multipolar world. And there's not much there in this summit declaration that shows any kind of transformation away from the liberal capitalist system that we have already. In fact, it's ironic that China is coming out as the most sturdy proponent of free trade and has for the last few years, which does beg to the question of what sort of transformation is BRICS really trying to encourage, and just how much is it about people to people, as both Trevor and Boris alluded to. So just getting then down to the nitty gritty of, so how does this then affect us in Africa and Southern Africa? What are these new developments? COVID, the invasion of the Ukraine, and the questions around ideological glue, which we know there isn't. What do those have in store in terms of changing things in the way that BRICS and FOCAC, the Forum for China-Africa Cooperation, what does that change in 2022 and beyond? And the bottom line is, if you're looking at it from a South African and inter-Africa perspective, not much. It's business as usual. Nothing really is changing. In fact, at the beginning of this year, if you look just at South Africa, one of the largest economic development initiatives, well, not just one, the largest of the special economic zones that we have in this country, has been approved. The environmental impact assessment went through despite a lot of protest and lobbying from environmental and other groups. And the zone is going to be completely run by the Chinese. There are Chinese investment pledges to the scale of 1.1 billion. That's just for the actual companies, let alone what South Africa is investing in terms of infrastructure, etc., startup costs. So that's going ahead, as is the flow of trade and what is called international development assistance to South Africa. So while we might ponder around what standpoints are being taken by individual leaders, and what are the nuances around, well, in Ramaphosa's case, it was very much a condemnation of NATO when it came to the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and the wording around any kind of condemnation around human rights has been really subsumed into the summit declaration. But we know that the states in BRICS have been very guarded about what they've said for understandable reasons. The declaration doesn't say much except they're upholding certain principles, again, of the UN Charter. But for the rest, other than the sort of state declarations made through BRICS, the actual real level of engagement around these topics that percolate down to society, civil society, to workers, trade unions, are virtually nil. And the only thing I would say that has changed a little bit in South Africa is that there is now far more engagement by unions such as COSATU, NUMSA, our two biggest unions, to say, well, we need to look at the forms of trade and aid coming in from not only China, but from all BRICS countries, but China in specific, since it is our biggest investor and our biggest provider of international development assistance. So that is the only area right now where there is a little bit more of a critique as to the benefits of this kind of cooperation. Otherwise, for the rest, from the state level anyway, it's promoted and seen as the way to encourage sustainable development, even with all the questions raised around with job creation, who will get jobs with these large-scale investments, such as Messina Mercado. Will there be, what kind of workers' rights will there be? We know that in special economic zones in South Africa and elsewhere in the world, one of the things that is usually part of the special economic zone package is to ensure that workers are not allowed to strike within the zones. So when we, as Trevor was saying, we think about, we think when we talk about or envisage a collaboration which is around global South, and we're thinking about, the terms inclusive development, we obviously have in our heads that that's going to percolate down at some point to a more workers, community level type of dialogue or forms of participation. But despite what some civil society organizations have done in BRICS, to date, we see a very much state-centric dialogue with a lot of posturing and a lot of ignoring of real ideological stances in favor of a very superficial and superfluous narrative around ideational coherency. I'll leave it there.